For ages, the mystery of death has puzzled mankind. Does our consciousness simply vanish when our mortal body dies? Or does it continue, as so many religions have claimed? Well, luckily science has put their best minds into solving this enigma. And this is what I will be presenting today. Greetings, mortals, and a capital day to all. I am your host Simon, and you are watching the Library of Gnosis. In today's broadcast, we will be exploring the science of near-death experiences. Specifically, what they can tell us about life after death. Roughly 9 million Americans claim to have had a near-death experience. It is thought that roughly 5% of the general population and 15 to 20% of critical patients, that is, those in critical care, have had an out-of-body experience. In the scientific or philosophical literature, a near-death experience is not a misunderstanding or misinterpretation of some other cognitive phenomena. As one leading author on the topic, Pim van Lommel, describes them, quote, "The NDE is an authentic experience that cannot be simply reduced to imagination, fear of death, hallucination, psychosis, the use of drugs, or oxygen deficiency." End quote. NDEs need to be examined as their own thing, a separate experience that millions of people around the world encounter, and which is irreducible to any other existing neuroscientific explanation. Lommel's landmark paper reveals several interesting things. First, NDEs have been shown to occur some minutes after the heart of a critical patient has stopped, and at a time when the brain ordinarily stops functioning and cortical activity becomes isoelectric. This implies that whatever the source or reason for these NDEs, it does not lie in normal, understood brain processes. Second, our recollection of NDEs is much more like real memories than imagined memories. As a research team from the University of Padova showed, NDE memories and the real memories had the same amount of mnesic characteristics, and both were more complex and richer than imagined memories. That is to say, NDEs cannot be immediately dismissed as the fictional nonsense of near death, at least in terms of memory and recollection. Finally, and perhaps most shockingly, people who have had NDE can often recount things that actually happened while they were unconscious, such as an open heart operation taking place. Even more oddly, in a point considering by psychiatrist Dr. Bruce Grayson in a video for Big Think, sometimes NDEs feature events that the experiencers couldn't even have known about. In Grayson's case, a patient could see him talking to a colleague a corridor away from where her bed lay. He could think of no other explanation for how she knew that fact. So, I managed to find a very interesting article on the National Library of Medicine, which, by the way, is an official website of the US government. I found most of this research so profoundly interesting that I will be simply reading excerpts from the article verbatim. So, to start us off, the first prospective study of the accuracy of out-of-body observations during near-death experiences was by Dr. Michael Sabom. This study investigated a group of patients who had cardiac arrests with NDEs that included OBEs, and compared them with a control group of patients who experienced cardiac crisis, but did not have NDEs. Both groups of patients were asked to describe their own resuscitation as best they could. Saboom found that the group of NDE patients were much more accurate than the control group in describing their own resuscitations. Another prospective study of out-of-body observations during near-death experiences with similar methodology to Saboom's study was published by Dr. Penny Satori. This study also found that near-death experiencers were often remarkably accurate in describing details of their own resuscitation. The control group that did not have NDEs was highly inaccurate, and often could only guess at what occurred during their resuscitations. Two large retrospective studies investigated the accuracy of out-of-body observations during near-death experiences. The first was by Dr. Janice Holden. Dr. Holden reviewed NDEs with OBEs in all previously published scholarly articles and books, and found 89 case reports. Of the case reports reviewed, 92% were considered to be completely accurate, with no inaccuracy whatsoever when the OBE observations were later investigated. Another large retrospective investigation of near-death experiences that included out-of-body observations was recently published. This study was a review of 617 NDEs that were sequentially shared on the NDE-RF website. Of these NDEs, there were 287 NDEs that had OBEs with sufficient information to allow objective determination of the reality of their descriptions of their observations during OBEs. Review of the 287 OBEs found that 280, 97.6%, of the OBE descriptions were entirely realistic and lacked any content that seemed unreal. In this group of 287 NDEers with OBEs, there were 65, 23%, who personally investigated the accuracy of their own OBE observations after recovering from their life-threatening event. Based on these later investigations, none of these 65 OBEers found any inaccuracy in their own OBE observations. The high percentage of accurate out-of-body observations during near-death experiences does not seem explainable by any possible physical brain function as it is currently known. This is corroborated by OBEs during NDEs that describe accurate observations while they were verifiably clinically comatose. Further corroboration comes from the many NDEs that have been reported with accurate OBE observations of events occurring far from their physical body and beyond any possible physical sensory awareness. Moreover, NDE accounts have been reported with OBEs that accurately observed events that were completely unexpected by NDEers. This further argues against NDEs as being a result of illusory memories originating from what the NDEers might have expected during a close brush with death. Near-death experiences with vision in the blind and supernormal vision. There have been a few case reports of near-death experiences in the blind. The largest study of this was by Dr. Kenneth Ring. This investigation included 31 blind or substantially visually impaired individuals who had NDEs or out-of-body experiences. Of the 31 individuals in the study, 10 were not facing life-threatening events at the time of their experiences, and thus their experiences were not NDEs. There were 14 individuals who were blind from birth in this study, and 9 of them described vision during their experiences. This investigation presented case reports of those born totally blind that described in NDEs that were highly visual with content consistent with typical NDEs. The NDE-RF website has received additional case reports of near-death experiences among those legally blind. For illustration, the following NDE happened to Marta, a 5-year-old blind girl who walked into a lake. Quote, I slowly breathed in the water and became unconscious. A beautiful lady dressed in bright white light pulled me out. The lady looked into my eyes and asked me what I wanted. I was unable to think of anything until it occurred to me to travel around the lake. As I did so, I saw detail that I would not have seen in real life. I could go anywhere, even to the tops of trees, simply by my intending to go there. I was legally blind. For the first time, I was able to see leaves on trees, birds' feathers, birds' eyes, details on telephone poles, and what was in people's backyards. I was seeing far better than 20/20 vision. End quote. An NDE-RF survey question asked 1,122 near-death experiencers. Quote, did your vision differ in any way from your normal, everyday vision? In any aspect, such as clarity, field of vision, colors, brightness, depth perception, degree of solidity, transparency of objects, etc. End quote. In response, 722, 64.3%, answered yes. 182, 16.2%, said uncertain. And 218, 19.4% responded no. A review of narrative responses to this question revealed that vision during NDEs was often apparently supernormal. Here are some illustrative examples from NDEs. Colors were beyond any I had ever seen. Everything seemed so much more colorful and bright than normal. My vision was greatly increased. I was able to see things as close or as far as I needed. There was no strain involved. It was almost like auto-zooming a camera. I had 360-degree vision. I could see above, below, on my right, on my left, behind. I could see everywhere at the same time. Vision in near-death experiencers that are blind, including totally blind from birth, has been described in many case reports. This, along with the finding that vision in NDEs is usually different from normal everyday vision, and often described as supernormal, further suggests that NDEs cannot be explained by our current understanding of brain function. This is also further evidence that NDEs are not the product of what NDEers would have expected to occur during a life-threatening event. Near-death experiences that occur while under general anesthesia, under adequate general anesthesia, it should not be possible to have lucid organized memory. Prior studies using EEG and functional imaging of the brain of patients under general anesthesia provide substantial evidence that the anesthetized brain should be unable to produce lucid memories. As previously discussed, following cardiac arrest, the EEG became flat in 10 to 20 seconds. And there is usually amnesia prior to and following the arrest. The occurrence of a cardiac arrest while under general anesthesia is a combination of circumstances in which no memory from that time should be possible. Here is an illustrative example of an NDE that occurred under general anesthesia during surgery for a heart valve replacement. During my surgery, I felt myself lift from my body and go above the operating table. The doctor told me later that they had kept my heart open and stopped for a long time, and they had a great amount of difficulty getting my heart started again. That must have been when I left my body, because I could see the doctors nervously trying to get my heart going. It was strange to be so detached from my physical body. I was curious about what they were doing, but not concerned. Then, as I drifted farther away, I saw my father at the head of the table. He looked up at me, which did give me a surprise, because he had been dead now for almost a year. End quote. I reviewed 613 near-death experiences shared with NDE-RF, and found 23 NDEs that appeared to have occurred while under general anesthesia. Cardiac arrest was the most common life-threatening event that was described in association with the occurrence of these NDEs. I compared the response of these 23 NDEs to the 590 non-anesthesia NDEs by reviewing how both groups responded to 33 survey questions that asked about the content of the NDEs. Chi-square statistics was used for this comparison. Due to the large number of questions asked, statistical significance was set at p(0.01). The only statistically significant difference between the two groups was that the anesthesia NDEs were more likely to describe tunnels in their experiences. An NDE-RF survey question asked, "How did your highest level of consciousness and alertness during the experience compare to your normal everyday consciousness and alertness?" For the NDEs occurring under general anesthesia, 83% of the respondents answered more consciousness and alertness than normal. To this question, compared to 437, 74% for all other NDEs. The response to this question by the two groups were not statistically significantly different. This suggests, remarkably, that the level of consciousness and alertness in NDEs is not modified by general anesthesia. Other near-death experience investigators have reported NDEs occurring while under general anesthesia. Dr. Bruce Grayson, a leading NDE researcher at the University of Virginia, states, "In our collection of NDEs, 127 out of 578 NDE cases, 22%, occurred under general anesthesia, and they included such features as OBEs that involved experiencers watching medical personnel working on their bodies, an unusually bright or vivid light, meeting deceased persons, and thoughts, memories, and sensations that were clearer than usual." NDEs due to cardiac arrest while under general anesthesia occur and are medically inexplicable. Near-death experiences and life reviews. Some near-death experiences include a review of part or all of their prior lives. This NDE element is called a life review. NDEers typically describe their life review from a third-person perspective. The life review may include awareness of what others were feeling and thinking at the time earlier in their life when they interacted with them. This previously unknown awareness of what other people were feeling or thinking when they interacted with them is often surprising and unexpected to the NDEers. Here is an example of a life review. Quote, I went into a dark place with nothing around me, but I wasn't scared. It was really peaceful there. I then began to see my whole life unfolding before me, like a film projected on a screen, from babyhood to adult life. It was so real. I was looking at myself, but better than a 3D movie, as I was also capable of sensing the feelings of the persons I had interacted with throughout the years. I could feel the good and bad emotions I made them go through. End quote. In my review of 617 near-death experiences from NDE-RF, a life review occurred in 88 NDEs, 14%. None of the life reviews in these NDEs appeared to have any unrealistic content as determined by my review, or based on comments by NDEers about their own life reviews. Life reviews may include long forgotten details about their earlier life that the NDEers later confirm really happened. If NDEs were unreal experiences, it would be expected that there would be significant error in life reviews, and possibly hallucinatory features. The consistent accuracy of life reviews, including the awareness of long forgotten events and awareness of the thoughts and feelings of others from past interactions, further suggest the reality of NDEs. Encountering deceased loved ones in near-death experiences. Near-death experiences may describe encounters with people that they knew during their earthly life. The following is an example of encountering a deceased loved one in an NDE. This example is also notable as the NDEer was born totally deaf. Quote, I approached the boundary. No explanation was necessary for me to understand. At the age of 10, that once I crossed the boundary, I could never come back. Period. I was more than thrilled to cross. I intended to cross. But my ancestors over another boundary caught my attention. They were talking in telepathy, which caught my attention. I was born profoundly deaf and had all my hearing family members, all of which knew sign language. I could read or communicate with about 20 ancestors of mine and others through telepathic methods. It overwhelmed me. I could not believe how many people I could telepathize with simultaneously. End quote. When people known to the near-death experiences are encountered in NDEs, the great majority are people who are deceased. A study by Dr. Emily Kelly was a comparison of 74 NDEs with descriptions of encountering deceased individuals with 200 NDEs that did not describe encounters with the deceased. This study found that when NDEers encountered beings known to them from their earthly lives in their NDEs, only 4% described meeting beings that were alive at the time of their experiences. I reviewed 84 NDEs from NDE-RF that described encounters with individuals that they knew in their earthly life. There were only 3 NDEs, 4%, where the encountered beings were alive at the time of the NDEs, consistent with the findings of the Kelly study. In dreams or hallucinations, when familiar persons are present, they are much more likely to be living and from recent memory. This is in sharp contrast to near-death experiencers, where familiar persons encountered are almost always deceased. Cases have been reported by NDEers of seeing a person who they thought was living, but in fact had recently died. These cases illustrate that NDEs cannot be explained by the experiencer's expectation of what would happen during a life-threatening event. Further evidence that NDEs are not the result of expectation comes from the aforementioned Kelly study, where 1/3 of the cases the encountered deceased person had a poor or distant relationship with the NDEers, or was someone that had died before the NDEer was born. Multiple lines of evidence point to the conclusion that near-death experiences are medically inexplicable and cannot be explained by known physical brain function. Many of the preceding lines of evidence would be remarkable if they were reported by a group of individuals during conscious experiences. However, NDEers are generally unconscious or clinically dead at the time of their experiences and should not have any lucid organized memories from their time of unconsciousness. So, do these scientifically verifiable accounts and studies of near-death experiences prove that there is an afterlife and that we have a soul? I think so. Of course, I have already had my own mystical experiences that prove the paranormal world is real to me. I was left with little doubt that there is more to this world than we perceive. If you enjoyed this broadcast, then please feel free to check out my Patreon. Thanks for watching, mortals. Or should I say, immortals. Stay safe and Godspeed.